Jesus, also referred to as Jesus Christ, Jesus of Nazareth, and other names and titles, was a first-century Jewish preacher and religious leader. He is the central figure of Christianity, the world's largest religion. Joseph Stalin was a Soviet politician, political theorist, and revolutionary who led the Soviet Union from 1924 until his death in 1953, ruling as a dictator after consolidating power in the late 1920s. The Big Sucker was a dog fight which was begun in 1933 and finished in 1991 at the Bodge Blanches, the premier theme park in Abortion, Florida, which opened in the spring of the year. The ride was built initially as a response to the slow output of rides that the park was having during the time, morphing into something more ambitious and ending up being 2 months lesser than the usual output of many rides in the park. A massive task for the team. What their unusually low budgets for. For this, it later gained a bit of a reputation for its faulty staging, with many guests being angered as its infrastructure was falling apart. But that's for later. The director of the project was Erectile Dysfunction, a 30-year-old man from Staten Island who was known predominantly as the man who fucked the moon to prove everyone he wasn't named that because he was born that way. Dysfunction was very miffed and quite angry about how everyone remembers him for that incident instead of his jet-fighter war crimes in Jibbistan. So he got a directorial job at Bodge Blanches to, quote, let those allegations roll in. Of course, Dysfunction couldn't outright expose himself as said by the law, so this didn't come easy. His first ever park he led in the making was Nothing, a ride which, despite being literally nothing, would succeed in income due to its $1,000 ticket, successfully making the rich feel rich, and thus succeeded as a ride. But to make such a complex ride was not easy, as Erectile Dysfunction was notorious for its overworking of the employees and brutal staff conditions. Construction worker Jack Ingoff recalled, every day we wake up at 3 a.m. and have to marry and divorce a woman to clock in and work for hours endlessly sculpting the ride for 25 hours. And if we didn't, we exploded. The fact that so many joined this thing must have involved drugs. And thanks to getting away with supplying their employees cocaine for a break and the survival of many collapses on the job, the management would hope Erectile Dysfunction would do the magic again in his new ride, which would thankfully happen. But as production on the Big Sucker was going on, the population was going through changes. Due to the ever-growing groups of people wanting to ban abortion, the city folk, old people included, were beginning to dramatically change culture. Influenced by alternative styles and a shared new fashion and music, change formed where women wore entire countries as continents on their heads, and bands played distortion pedal banjos to crowds wearing stolen medieval armory in outer space for the whole night sometimes. What I just described to you was the first ever King Gizzard concert, and one of the many show-offs of power that dominated the new culture. They called it abortion, and it was the hot multiform culture of its decade. It was so mainstream in the city of the time, other cultures such as vasectomy and heart failure took a bit of a hit from all the shifting trends, and ultimately ending up as how we know him today. But since Erectile Dysfunction was old and stupid, he had no awareness of current events and was not made aware of it until his son, Brain Dysfunction, would talk to him about starting a small band with his friends 20 years after it began. Seeing this, Dysfunction would decide to scrap all his plans for a Nothing Part 2 ride and decide to get more large, ambitious, and not responsive to those who disliked the output of his rights anymore. When the production team was shown Dysfunction's detailed direction for his new ride, the co-director had to be supplied oxygen tanks full of carbon emissions to breathe probably from the amount of amusement he was on. Construction was started right after Nothing, and due to its crucialness, was built on the road right next to Bodge Blanches. The construction would go extremely fast and smooth, with the employees remarking how they've never been more happy to construct and polish anything since they made the World Trade Center. In fact, the construction will be moving so fast, employees would joke about how this will take 50 years to make. But even if a time goal was made, they had to get a little lucky for this to stay relevant with the always changing culture. Many years in the dominance of abortion, the genre would have eternally ingrained into the city and its culture, but also be victim of gentrifying itself gradually for the years, as they get totally normalized like an enforced rule. And so, as famous abortion bands licensed their thrash metal classics to children's daycares, the public would begin upwooing some of the cultures that still didn't leave abortion and lived in their own underground for a while. Oftentimes musical acts as the West were rocking out and grow them. Cultures such as country emo, a country emo bash for all the sad, racist cowboy skeletons in the city. Hardcore classical, a hot take on classical which was finally repopularized canons as an instrument. Animal core, a mostly fashion community about being animals, which would famously be the precursor to the Manwell County cannibalism parties. So, as abortion would take a cultural decline, other new trends would steadily sprout onto a wider popularity, with a palette of expressions of the place having a little renaissance. A very big part of the public would be exposed to the new stores, and many would confuse the juicy deercore apparels for food. Many corporate fellas would soon be spotted on the streets looking to understand the hip new fashion trends of homeless core to see if they'd play in their concerts, but of course, like any evolving city, it'll have some conflict. The bootgaters would think some of the other cultures would have a little too try-hardy in their opinion, and the barely disguised Nazi core would think they're too soft. Of course, these were more menial, but eventually they'd burn into more crucial and dangerous infightings. It was absolute chaos, but luckily, the big soccer lair opened in November of that year to a giant crowd of people, later to change everything. From the entrance, the rider will board a 4-passenger seat on a visible through line and be driven into a room and subsequently be shot. And it was a smash hit. Many publications would give the ride glowing praise, giving Bodge Blodges the most amount of money and visitor in several states. In fact, it was so good, the entire force of opposition to abortion mysteriously all died. There was no doubt from how good the Big Sucker was. The success of a Big Supper kept its large momentum for about the entire month, before getting the same amount of money other popular rides like the Skeleton Explode 2000 and the aforementioned Nothing usually got. It fit neatly with the deaf or literally nothing slogan of the park and remained successful the remainder of the decade. Erectile dysfunction, getting fed up how his allegations have not leaked yet, would start going after different career paths. After reading a newspaper about a jailed kitty dealer, he took it as a hint and joined the Midwest emo band, despite not being from the Midwest and not believing it existed in the first place. He and his likely paid band, The Guys That Live in Farms, would have an okay career, releasing one album via Records named I Bomb Adoption Centers, which Pitchfork would say that mixing was ass. But meanwhile, unbeknownst to the absent director, the Big Sucker would go through some times not as rocky, but would ultimately lead to the sucker's downfall. After the Anti-Abortion Federation were getting its biggest blow on members, both metaphorically and literally, the head of the movement and brother of erectile dysfunction, collarbone dysfunction, would begin a plot to beat those Bodge Blodges at their own game. Several years after the Big Sucker, they introduced the Large Vacuum, a legally okay take of a Big Sucker with objectively better upgrades, such as a camera whose screenshots guess the but for memorabilia that everyone after the ride to buy, better staff to prevent couples from touching, even rubbing body parts, to avoid the gunner from having to realize he's not straight, and more options for the type of weapon so park guests can experience looking at an NFT. Not only was this a perfect improvement from the Big Sucker, but it was released at a great time as well, with Bodge Blodge's original going on some unsavory times of its own. After years of glory and prestige for being the classic of a ride the Big Sucker was, the Bodge Blodges would begin getting a bit of public backlash. First, due to the heartbreaking events that happened on 2/30, the place would have to do some changes to remove any likeness to the event. First, they'd remove the bricks. outraged, the gargoyle was crushing people in plain sight, inciting controversy and protests. Many parkgoers were convinced the gargoyle was guilty, and so the gargoyle would work quickly for a response to hopefully clear his name and revitalize his career. Unfortunately for him, YouTube and the internet had not been a thing yet at this time, so instead he got a good idea and sell his response on flipbooks. They'd be going in everyone's collection, with a giant public attention deeming the paper very convincing and well articulated, at last saving the Garg's heavily injured career from death. But despite his response, Garg would be hit with an overdose of bad luck in the form of getting suddenly grabbed by the newly returned erectile dysfunction. After his last and final concert, in which he played a recently dug up chord for a guitar, only for the audience to think this was just a Chihuahua chord concert, he stormed out and returned to his main job, only to be more pissed off at missed opportunity. So to keep this negativity ball to the place roll, he'd hop on his illegal fighter jet and start raining Greek sculptures onto the entire city below, sacrificing many stone people's lives during the process. After what felt like hours of raining minerals on the passerby, he lands back on the heli drone of his place and heads to the couch with a non-existent smile of a cheeky bastard. He turns on the TV to see if his plan worked and finds out that he agrees. But firstly, the ending was quite quickly cut short when the weatherman concluded all of it was a new type of weather conducted by gay new asteroid showers. Once again, the city was gently returned to its regular track of peace, culture, ravenous fear of asteroid showers, and really good spaghetti. The city-wide cultural panic will grip heavily on the public at large, starting panic among all the people, and infamously halting the area's selling of bricks too. Many PSAs were played frequently, instructing children on how to unlock rock resistance free in the Little Peach skill tree. Many of them were hateful in the community, blamed the coal miners of having some input in the events, and the coal miners simply called out the coal adults for help. And many in the opposition in the city were sitting from their desk, watching the ruckus happening next to their barrier in construction attraction, and started getting some ideas to make sure this game changer surely lands. So with a hard-working crew of workers and day of almost all work, all the bricks would be set on fire. Not only was this brand new construction method a great message to any forthcoming asteroids in the way, but it gave the wires the warm, comfortable sensation of an arson attack. This would be very important to their success, as the manager and his low-wage workers looked down to their building knowing Venus Greater Thunberg is asteroid waiting in the womb, promptly high-five each other's, to the ties of 200 million new writers. All this, giant threat of a higher class of Dodge. What was now around in the city was places where asteroids couldn't crash, and a large vacuum was one place near the homes where those space rebels feared. More and more folks were losing city patriotism, and the mayor was still working on the giant pointless mining drill randomly on the skyscraper, which would end up making the asteroids think they were in Russia. So, on October 4301, Dodge went all in. A squad of space jets were shot up to the vast space above. The mission was to get to the asteroid planet and bomb it to the ground. One of the boldest moves that remain in abortion history, second next to the time they went searching for an heroin planet. The first day went off on the best foot, but the increase of support for the city was worth every penny of the launch. Though they were scared they might end up losing one of the asteroid's deadliest weapons, moons. If it happened, it would have not stopped the plan that these jets were part of. The workers were hard at work for this massive not falling off scheme, most of them for a brand new TV show specifically catering to give hope and comfort to the abortion supporters. And maybe the ones on the other side. How neat! It was called Don't Worry, the Homo Rocks won't hurt you here with this. You'll be cool and alright with us, yeah! Wait, what did you say? No, that's a lie. Oh God! This can't be! This can't possibly be! As deemed by the showrunner rapidly turning into a fetish. The show was ordered by the higher-ups to strike a balance between quick and efficient and grand and wondrous. This likely heavily resulted in the premise being of a sci-fi fantasy high-concept series about workers that get paid enough to live, which would greatly boost morale and city patriotism. All they had to do was to get control over another company and get them to add $3 to the salaries, and they were all getting lots of populatory stability. Sure, if they were tightening their cash flow quite a hefty, carefully and tactically managing finance between investments, park staffs for 70 private islands, and advertisement, but the result was paying low. The people were at a good balance between the two sides, and the anti-abortion side would have to respond. Seeing how their dominant star-studding space battalion are currently up there, valiantly waiting to get their space passports with dignity, as they heroically do this. The ground agent scanning the area notifies them. Ground agent here. I might have found the planet you guys are looking for. Yeah, what is it? Well, it seems to be a hideout, having heavy steel protection around it, seeming to carry any resources and other materials. Oh, that's a space fridge. Is that carrying supplies or something? No, it's there in outer space for no reason. It's got like space food and space water, I think. Then what's with the anti-abortionist flag on it? That's also a space, what the fuck? After the anti-abortionist base was found, the anti-abortion space fight of the year battle war soon took place, resulting in a casualty approximation of 300 anti-abortionists and 0 abortionists due to the antis being anticlimactically crushed by the space fridge. Despite this not really being a battle, this sent shockwaves in the city, exposing the deep company tension waging, and now making not killing each other on meeting anti-abortionist propaganda. Tensions arose between the two sides, with mutual discrimination and hatred signaling a great battle might occur in the near but far future. Both were not minorities, with both sides on equal ground, especially after the Anti-Abortion Federation's new attraction, California! Just like Bart's plan, these two had a new commercial experience, and not very, secret space jet operation to kill the asteroids, marketed as an open-world sequel to their beloved furnace ride, Large Vacuum. It was the true one-uppance of Bart's, featuring even more burning everywhere, wild original new species called celebrities, an ecosystem to duke it out turn-based style, and a brand new California exclusive invention, drugs. But the most marketed part of California was that you could buy a special battle pass to live in California. Now the threat of asteroids is completely kaput. And naturally, questioning how dystopian it is to live under a corporation's whims, the people live there anyway, just not in the houses or buildings. Unfortunately, the management spent too much money on buying RPGs to study how to apply it to their California, so they just fill all the houses with dogs to make it look like people actually care about living there. Now this was where the tense climax really started to boil ferociously. People were rushing with weapons. Barricades were made with furious anger. The buildings hardened like pillbugs. The ground grows like a bug's chrysalis. The air is filling with human aggression, and soon there'll be nothing but. But before any man casts a blow upon the cracking, hopeless window of peace, the blow that completely changes the course of a city's history, the blow akin to Lincoln's murder and the shot heard around the world, the clouds started to form, they started to light, and they began to shut the fuck up! And with an adjusted atmosphere to put on his suit, Jesus arrived to erectile dysfunction's office, and they get to talking about how Jesus isn't really all cool being dragged to all the big sucker copycats to show off for them all. Never has he licensed his name on so many things since he initially blew up by being mentioned in a Garfield comic. However, You too could talk about being crushed by the unbearable weight of no consequences. And neither could dysfunction, suffering in silence to the corner. He had tried it all. He tried to give kids free weed on the streets, but they mistook it for a healthy greed and ate it instead. He went on Fox News to rant about returning to 1800s politics, but nobody knew what the 1800s were, and none of them ended bad for him. He knew his money was the heart of what kept him to be so bad and losing everything in his life like he wanted. It even made him mad at dying, living to be a 150-year-old traffic light. He was completely trapped by his own achievements for what he so desperately wanted. But suddenly he turns towards the sort confused Jesus with a bright idea and his non-existent smile. He says, "Oh, I know exactly how to fix this legal thing." Before jumping off of windows and avoiding responsibility, landing to the rooftop before stretching out his arms to pick up the entirety of a big sucker, before beginning to leap through abortion's many rooftops. When he at last met his destination, he was face to face with history bleeding into the veins of a city, right next to his very eyes. Hundreds of men and women destroyed each other's families, scientific game changers, planet game changers, offering passion and pain for what they believed in. Erectile dysfunction raises the big sucker into the air, points a shotgun at it, and breaks his one rule of everything. He yells towards the crowd in detail about how much he's been trying to get karma for his actions. Secretly, he didn't expect this to work and was just trying a last-ditch effort. But to his luck, the people finally reacted in panic. Everyone stopped and started running and yelling due to this man being able to lift up a building to his arms. This was centuries worth of build-up and pain coalescing into his final goal in life. And this could never have been a situation where he couldn't contain his excitement. One pull of the trigger and he was the worst human alive, and there was no chance for anyone to stop him. He was a full rooftop over, and he had no reason to deny this moment until the slightly larger man came in and slapped the building off him, causing it to completely disassemble and blow up before the man just laughed. It was gone! And that was when erectile chain dysfunction truly lost it. He just stood on top of a rooftop to a searing amount of sights of relief below, and he couldn't move at all. He got everything he wanted, and then got everything he didn't want. And so as most pissed off, his most enraged, he jumps furiously down, straight into the crowd to finally get out of the car he's had for years! But he still had money. And it was so funny that everyone stopped to laugh. In fact, it was so funny for the crowd that they completely forgot they were fighting in a scene-changing battle and even started to buddy up a little. Erectile dysfunction, even more miffed and crying, started to explain to them why we should be laughing at his war crimes instead of how bad he is at dying. But unfortunately, his loud explanations didn't work with how infinitely funnier the misfortune of powerful people is in comparison. And with a situation solved somehow, it was time for the son of normal to get back up to the sky. People were shaking hands, the tension was going down. I'm gonna be over with my 16-hour writing session in a bit, and most importantly, it was time for a little change. After some management discussion, the entirety of California was picked up and moved to be a location in the much more profitable Mega Arizona, where we focused most of our efforts in. The thing about anti-abortioners being very against the abortioners kicked into both sides' heads, and they decided to both change their names into early-stage abortion and late-stage abortion, respectively. But Bonds Blotches eventually decided to go all in on their animation department and successfully specialized in uncomedy movies. Movies that make the audience feel completely nothing whilst watching it, and eventually managed to beat out Amy Schumer in ratings. And finally, erectile dysfunction will become early-stage abortion's newest cryptid, with sightings describing witnessings of a crying in the woods. Erectile dysfunction will finally die in a year unspecified due to all the money that's been keeping him alive rotting from his pants, forever ingraining into the city folklore with Samson dance and homeless people. This is where the story of a big sucker ends. Of course, early-stage abortion's history continues well after this, with various well-documented parts of their history, like that incident in 1999, where they found out the only thing death could really have won was a pogo stick, and successfully all became death proof. But unfortunately, we'll have to do that for now. Have a good day, evening, night, or whatever time of day you're in, and tune in for next time. Barney the Dinosaur was a TV show that